What is vertical farming? Why is it so useful? Where is the most unlikely yet useful location for a farm? If you'd like to find out, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Between Views. I'm your host, Alec Koski. This podcast aims to cast light on and connect you with inspirational people, identify them as potential mentors in your journey, and share their stories and wisdom with the world. In this episode, we converse with Wayne Ford, CEO at Vertical Patch, about the future of urban farming. Wayne, welcome to Between Views.
Good to be here, Alec. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem at all. Thank you for coming on. So just for people listening at home, I was recently very inspired by an impressive vegetable patch out the back of a new friend of mine's house. I was stood out in the back for about half an hour looking at Wayne's veggie patch and seeing how beautiful and perfectly grown all of the vegetables were, and I had a little bit of veggie envy. My veggies often have, the odd spot or, some bugs or things on them. Couldn't find anything wrong with the ones out there, so we got to chatting and quickly found out that there was a lot more to the knowledge behind these veggie patches, and it got me thinking that Wayne would be a really good guest to have on. And recently, after dropping by, I've come across the fact that there's a lot more than I even realised to begin with. Secondly, as well, Wayne has a really nice voice, which you're going to hear in a second, Morgan Freeman-esque, I think, and I thought I might as well get it on the podcast. It'll be relaxing none the least.
Good stuff.
So I won't dilly-dally for too long, but I guess we'll just go ahead and start with one thing that I'm really interested in, and that is vertical farming. I've heard about that a few times recently. I know it's kind of, I guess you could say, an on-trend business model for farming, and with a bigger world full of more people, there's now less space, right? So can you explain to everyone what is vertical farming?
Yeah, sure, Alec. Great to be here, and thanks for having me. Vertical farming is a combination between what's called controlled environment agriculture and protected cropping. Probably leans more towards controlled environment. So think of a box, and inside that box you can grow literally anything because you're controlling all aspects. You're controlling the irrigation, you're controlling the light, you're controlling the temperature, the airflow. Vertical farming works in that way. So, and there's many different forms of vertical farming. One of those is that we use. So we call ourselves true vertical farming, and that we have vertical grow towers. So these are vertical tubes, if you like, which we put our seedling in, and within a very short space of time, because you have those perfect conditions, you can grow that crop pretty quickly. So it's got lots of benefits. It has that ability to grow really quickly. The other thing about it is our aim is to do vertical farming within urban environments. So we want to be as close to those people who want to consume our product, which does mean that we can tailor the quantities of products to the customer. Most farmers want to grow as much as they possibly can in as short a time as possible. What they don't always think about is what's the transport to that. So we just had some pumpkin soup. Unfortunately, the pumpkin probably come from Brisbane or Queensland. It might have even come from Western Australia, which means it's travelled a huge amount of miles, and to just get the pumpkin to the markets.
Yeah. And
then, of course, once it goes to the markets, it then goes to someone who buys a whole bunch of pumpkins, probably your greengrocer, maybe Coles or Woolies. And then even then, it could be 3 or 4 weeks before you get that pumpkin. So the pumpkin could be 2 to 3 months old before you actually get it after it's been picked.
Yeah.
Our preference is to grow the product and you can use it today. And because we're right next door to you, then that means the food, the produce is that much fresher, which also means it's got a lot more nutrients to it.
Yeah.
And it also means that we have what's called less inputs to make that produce. The big thing that hits vertical farming is energy. There's a huge cost in energy. Everyone's probably experienced their energy bills going up. But we've been able to de-risk that to a large degree because we use solar, we use batteries, and we also use we buy what's called green power as well, which means we're using as much generation of energy as possible, on-site generation, and that which we can't use, we buy. So, yeah.
So you're actually talking right now about vertical patch, right?
Correct. Yeah. Vertical patch is the business, and sorry, I digressed a little bit.
No, that's okay. We're going to talk about that anyway.
Yeah. Well, look, the other bit to it is, we're sitting here in sunny Canberra, but Sydney's been smashed by torrential rain. Large part of the Hawkesbury's flooded, which is unfortunate in the current climatic conditions that we're experiencing. So a lot of the farms that produce some of the produce that we're making get hit by those really bad conditions, either drought, torrential rain, flooding, hail, of course, is another one that hits. It's what we call the polytunnel agricultural business as well. So they're massively impacted
by bad conditions,
by extreme weather conditions. Luckily, we're in a bunker, so we don't get hit by that. And the biggest risk to us is if we lose power. But we've also de-risked that to a large degree because we've got multiple power supplies.
Yeah. So people are turning to vertical farming because it reduces the amount of poor weather conditions that can affect the grow state. So you get more reliable turnover.
100%. So that what it does mean is the life of a farmer is very risky. Traditional farming is you've got 20 head of cattle, and hopefully by the time that cattle's ready to go to market, the value of that cattle is worth a lot of money. Hopefully.
Yeah, best case scenario.
Hopefully the cattle's also as fat as possible because you want as much weight as possible on that cow, on the herd. But of course, if you're hit by drought or if you're hit by floods or if you're hit by really extreme weather conditions, that's not always the case. So, and whether you're talking about vegetables or cattle, it has the same impact. You could have a monocrop farmer who could be growing something, and for 6 months, that's their one crop. And just before they're about to take it to market, they get smashed by some of that climatic conditions, which means, it's really unfortunate for the farmer, but they're unable to take that crop, or only a very small proportion. So vertical farming is not to replace traditional farming; it's to help supplement traditional farming.
Really?
So a big part of what we're trying to do is introduce more different types of varieties of fruit and veg because we can grow it.
Yeah.
A farmer always looks to grow something that is highly in demand, but also has wonderful nutrient, wonderful flavors and so forth.
Yeah.
That's not always possible because they're always worried about, I've got to get this to the market. And I'll give you another example, and this probably helps you to understand a little bit where I came from. Even 20 years ago, the only tomato you could buy was this big round thing about the size of a tennis ball. And it generally wasn't even that red. It was sort of like an orangey colour because they'd always pick it green. By the time it got to the markets, it was starting to turn orange, maybe a little bit red. And both my father and also my uncle used to grow these tomatoes, which would it was more like squeezing something that just all this incredible juice came out of. And the flavours coming out of those tomatoes were just incredible. Nothing that you could ever buy from the shops. And the reason why you couldn't buy those is because they had a really soft skin. They wouldn't transport very well.
True.
So that's where vertical farming can come in, because it's not transporting long distances. You can generally grow a lot of the stuff that the farmers, traditional farmers, don't want to grow because they know it's not going to travel, or it's not going to last. So you can get all these massive varieties of different crops through that, and that's what we're trying to do is introduce those different crops and different varieties. So, and hopefully cheaper, not always, but at a cheaper price.
So what does a vertical farm actually look like?
There's many different varieties. There's some that are really super high tech. So it looks like a machine's just running up and down the rows and it's tending these big long strings of tomato vines. Or alternatively, you can just get these horizontal shelves, big long horizontal shelves of leafy greens or of some sort of even herbs. Or in our case, we have these vertical towers, and our vertical towers actually rotate around the whole space. So it's a bit like going to a dry cleaners where you pick up your shirt if you've got to get your shirt dry cleaned, or your suit, and the guy presses a button, he goes, number 99, and number 99 spins around on the conveyor. We do the same thing, but instead of having a shirt hanging off it, we have this big long tower. We call it a grow tower, and it's got plants on it. And the idea with our concept is, instead of having these massive long rows that people have to walk up and down and go up, because they can go quite high. The highest vertical farm is about 10 metres. So it's like a massive shed, huge shed, really high. So they've got to get in a scissor lift, and away they go down aisle number 55 and, up 10 metres to pick a crop.
Why do they do it
different?
Why do they do it in like such a big space like that? I would have thought it would be done floor by floor.
You can do it that way. Look, I think there was this real buzz even a couple of years ago with vertical farming. A lot of it went immediately to the real high tech, and to the point where high tech was everything. But I think even in the last couple of years, they've realised you don't have to go to the high tech. A lot of the stuff that we use is off the shelf. So it's like farming by using all the bits and pieces that you can get. There's not a lot of IP associated with it, but because we use this conveyor system, our farm comes to our farm hands and our farm technicians, as distinct to most of the other vertical farms where the farm technician has to go to the plant, which could be in the back of the shed, 10 metres high, which takes you a lot of time. So the idea with us is we want to reduce the time of the farm hand. And in fact, we want to make the farm smaller. So by having these rotating conveyor system, it actually means we can condense the size of space.
Right. More space for growing.
Huge. So our motto is we grow more in less space.
So like on the card.
Yep. It's a good little thing to do, but and then we're looking for space. So the current space that we're fitting out now is right in the middle of Sydney City. It's in a hole in the ground. It used to be a car park.
Yes.
And we're fitting that out as a vertical farm.
Yes. Are you allowed to talk about that right now?
Yeah.
Because I found that highly intriguing when you said that the other day. I was like, wow, what an amazing you're collaborating with a big computer company, right? No, like a Bitcoin mining computer?
No, that's our data farm. So the one in Sydney City is what we call our true vertical farm. The one that we've got in Artarmon is actually inside a data center. And this data center, every data center is different. They all have different clients. The client in this data center is a crypto miner. So they mine for Bitcoin as an example. And there's just racks and racks of servers, which are like large hard desktop computers lined on massive racks. And generally within those spaces, they're high security. They don't want anyone in there. But also they've got redundancy, which means if the energy goes down, they still want their computers to work or the air conditioning to work. So they have a second amount of power feed. In fact, they have a third amount of power feed, and then they've still got a backup generator. So if one power feed breaks, the other one clicks in. The beauty about that data center is that's all they want to do. They just want to mine for cryptocurrencies. But most data centers just operate 24/7. So they generate a huge amount of heat. They use a lot of energy. And we've been able to locate our farms within the spaces of the backs of these server racks, which sounds really weird because most data centers wouldn't want to have water anywhere near.
No.
They're very expensive.
Seems like an odd combination. But why is it a good space for you?
Oh, it's a great space for us because our biggest expense is we want to keep our plants happy in temperature. We want to keep them happy with most plants like air moving across them, just like you have in your garden. Not too much air that it blows like a cyclone, but enough air to get air transfer across that. That also helps to keep the pests away because if you had reasonable airflow across your plants, you generally don't get as many pests.
Oh, really?
Yep. And that includes fungicides as well. Fungicides don't like a breezy plant. And most good gardeners, particularly tomato growers, generally trim their plants right down.
Just keep the breeze coming through.
Keep the airflow through the plant. So we get, off the back of the server racks, we get beautiful temperature air. We get beautiful rate of airflow. And it's such a really neat environment to operate in. The other thing that happens is, because most data centers have a really bad rap about using way too much energy and are not very green, whatever that means, then they really love the fact that we're actually growing produce that goes to the markets that evening to sell to restaurants. And, those restaurants could be eating something we've grown the night before in a data farm. So, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And,
it's a cool collaboration. It's like almost symbiotic. Do they get a carbon emissions cut because you're using their emissions in a way?
So look, the whole carbon trading thing is a really interesting concept, and it's a little bit difficult to depict. The simplest way to explain it is some farmers get carbon credits right now in the carbon market if they don't take out native forest from their farm. So they might have a patch of their farm that they've got some original native forest or at least some landscape that they haven't touched. And they're actually awarded now if they don't remove that as an alternative into farming space. So it's called farming credits. There's other ways to get farming credits, but that's one simple way. And what they're relying on is that space will always be there to suck up carbon or to plant trees. So they can also plant trees, which theoretically, if they maintain those trees on their property for 20, 30 years, it's going to suck up a lot of carbon. We don't do that because our produce doesn't last 20, 30 years. Our produce lasts, 10 to 12 days. But it does suck up carbon, but you need to have it for an enduring period of time. The way that we can get carbon credits is something that we've learned. There's one recent example out of the UAE where they've actually got, it's called energy efficiency credits, being if they've got a farm that consumes X amount of energy and then they apply all these energy efficiency measures to it, theoretically the difference in the CO2 emissions out of a energy intensive part of their business to a less energy intensive, they can claim the carbon credits for that.
All right.
So that's where we think we're going to get it. And it benefits not only the data center, but it also benefits us. And look, that's something we're exploring with them. They're just happy to have us there because they know that it really blows away the credibility. Well, adds to their credibility that they're actually trying to do something with some of that excess stuff.
Yeah, true.
So that they're really, really chuffed. And even better, when people come to the data center and then they open up one of the doors to our farms inside the data center and they see all these racks of green micro herbs and microgreens being grown, they're like, what the, so it's quite exciting to see the look on their face and you go, wow, this is what's happening here.
How do you avoid getting water into the
into the data set? Look, we've isolated our there's air transfer that comes from the back of the server racks, and we've got a membrane that actually allows air to pass through one way, but it can't pass the other way, which also means if we get another layer, we can stop any water going back that way. So it's called a unidirectional membrane.
Okay.
It's a bit like Gore-Tex. You remember Gore-Tex when it first came out?
Yeah, I got it in my shoes.
And it says Gore-Tex actually breathes, but it only breathes in one direction. So Gore-Tex doesn't allow rain in because you don't want a Gore-Tex jacket that's going to let rain in.
No.
But it helps you to breathe in the other direction. So we've put these screens on at the back of the server racks that allow the air transfer to happen and the temperature transfer, but it doesn't allow water to transfer back the other way.
Okay, so you've essentially almost put like a Gore-Tex at the back of your
It's like a Gore-Tex in that sort of way, but they're very expensive screens that,
I can imagine.
To buy to line the insides of these, what we call our growing space versus what they call their mining space or their data space.
Yeah, true. Was it hard to convince them about it? Like, did you have to show them that you weren't going to like essentially water their computers and see if you could grow some crypto yourself?
Yeah, very, very. I mean, we experimented with one pod.
Yeah.
That only had a very small amount of servers on it, and look, to say that went flawlessly is incorrect. We did have some things that went wrong, but luckily it didn't impact their servers. Look, the other thing with the data center is it's a bit like AI and computer learning on steroids, because the biggest part of what they do is they want to know everything that's happening with their computers, but they also want to know everything that's happening in the space around it. So if the temperature drops all of a sudden, or if the temperature goes up all of a sudden, they want to know about it, and they want to know about it in a split second. So they've got sensors and monitors, and everything's going on so quickly, and so that is a super monitored and controlled space. A vertical farm's a little bit like that. We don't need anywhere near that level, but we certainly leverage that control aspect. And we've actually taken their controls and put it inside our farm, which means we now get these signals every 20 seconds to say the farm is operating okay. And so it's a bit like Alexi, but Alexi everywhere in the whole farm. And so Alexi's always telling us if one of the pumps is
What's
off.
Alexi?
Alexi as in Google.
Oh, Alexa.
Google Alexi. Alexa, sorry, what did I say? Alexi.
You got a nickname for it.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. So we leverage their control system. And it's great because if we were to buy that control system in the market, it's super expensive. And we've been able to leverage the stuff. And it's not much for them to actually extend that into our space. A few more sensors, and we've got this beautiful dashboard that tells us exactly what's going on per pod, per rack, per space.
Wow.
So not quite a camera on every plant, but it's nearly there.
Well, it's microgreens a lot of the time, isn't it? So
it is.
That'd be a lot of cameras.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a huge amount of cameras. So we're currently just growing in the data center farm at Artarmon, just microgreens, and we're selling that now to Sydney markets. We do have some restaurant groups that we sell to, but we're principally just opened it up because we're going to get a huge amount of volumes coming out of this data center. So that's really exciting because there's lots of data centers around Australia, lots of data centers who want to go, at least do something with their excess. And we think we can be exactly that. And because they're in great locations, this one in Artarmon is a perfect example. Just north of North Sydney, it's less than, it's about 12 k's away from Sydney markets.
It's not the one that's out on the side of the highway, is it?
No, there's a couple of big ones that have just popped up as well.
I've seen a few of them.
There's a monster one that's just opened up. And so, you have to know what you're looking at when you see them. A lot of them have popped up from what was the old Telstra exchanges. These are buildings that used to hold all the old telephone exchange equipment. And because all that equipment's got much smaller, it's probably about 1/20th the size. They don't need the massive spaces for these telephone exchange.
So you can see Vertical Patch collaborating with more data centers over time then?
Yep.
How did you come up with that idea in the first place? Because that's like so far from anything I've ever even considered thinking about. Like, how did you land here?
We were lucky enough to be introduced to this guy by the name of Chris Willis, who part owns this company called Mine HQ. And Chris is a mad scientist. You know, if you ever see those shows where the scientist walks around in a lab coat, Chris is the exact opposite of that. He's always walking around with baggy jeans, but he is just an incredible head on his shoulder. And he's always looked at this from a real engineering issue of how do you make data centers do what they're doing, but do it a lot more efficiently. And when we spoke to him over lunch about it, he said, I want to come out and have a look at your farms. And then when we saw, he showed us his data center when we said, I think we could do this. But we were really skeptical because we were like, I don't think they'll take the risk. And Chris took the risk and he said, yep, we want to do it. About 6 months later, we all came back and had a look at what had been done. And we thought, wow, that's not what we want to do exactly. So we redesigned the whole farm that we created. And now we've got to a model where we think is super efficient and can do everything that we need. Produce so much leafy greens and produce, particularly microgreens, that just that one farm will be able to provide a huge amount of punnets per day of microgreens. So, we're pretty excited. We're only at about a third of the capacity right now, and every month we get another, what we call grow pod online. So before the
grow pod?
A grow pod's basically the inside of the back of the server racks.
Okay.
It's where we are, where we grow.
I got you.
So he calls his overall pod, which he has the servers in, calling a mining pod, and we're a grow pod inside that. So, it's a pretty cute name, but that's essentially what it is.
Yeah. Speaking of cute things, I just saw the packets of microgreens and we had some in our tomato soup.
Yeah.
And they were so fresh and delicious and just adorable too. Like I've always loved purple and green as a colour scheme anyway. It's very natural. It's actually the colour of sprouts, funnily enough, a lot of the time is that sort of purpley green colour. And it's also used to be the same colours as my soccer team that I grew up playing for. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is great. What was sort of like the whole process of like landing at microgreens as your main product for now?
Oh, look, we grow a whole bunch of other stuff. We grow baby herbs. We grow herbs.
Oh, okay.
We do leafy greens as well. So at our other farms, at our vertical farms, we actually do everything from in the herb range you could think of. So coriander, parsley, basil. We generally don't do the perennial herbs, so we don't do rosemary. But we do nearly other soft herb. We also do a whole range of leafy greens. So we used to do a massive range of mustards. There's probably about 6 or 7 different varieties of mustard leaves. Everything from a hakarashi, which is this, if you ever like your spicy things coming out of Japan, this leaf tastes exactly like that. You know, it's got this real depth of mustard pepperiness that some people don't like it, but a lot of other people go, wow, how can you get that in a peppery green?
Yeah.
So these are things that, think about any of those real delicate leaf things that would be really hard to grow out in the open, and even in a protected cropping, i.e. a polytunnel. We tend to look at those and go, we can grow those things. So we do those. So that's our pretty much our full range. We landed on microgreens for the data center because we're confined by space and height.
Okay.
And we thought it's got a really good proximity to the markets, so we thought we'd go with that. So it's a bit of a toss-up. You've got to balance up all of these things from what's best to grow in the space that we've got, in the location that we've got. We're about to look at how we can harvest and produce mushrooms. And again, we're not going to go to button mushrooms, the usual stuff that you can buy in your grocery store. We want to go to those that are a little bit more exotic. Lion's mane is one. There's a whole range of different oyster mushrooms, which are just spectacularly
so good,
incredible flavour. But the same thing there. You can buy mushrooms today that may have been harvested 10 to 20 days ago. We want to actually grow mushrooms where we want to harvest them today, now, and you'll have them either for tonight or tomorrow morning. And this is generally in restaurants where they're using large volumes, or even catering groups. And that means the meal will be that much fresher. The flavour of the mushroom will be a lot more intense, but also the nutrient levels will be that much better. Mushrooms are interesting to grow, but we think with some of the spaces that we've got would be able to knock it out of the park pretty easily.
Yeah, true, because is there like a chance you could introduce, I suppose, fungus into the area by doing that? Like, is there a chance that it can sort of get out of the boxes, like spores make it through, or do you have blocks for the spores and things like that?
Yeah, look, all of the farms that we operate to has got at least a double airlock, if not a triple airlock. And it's not quite, we're not growing a new virus or anything like that. So we're really, but mushrooms interesting. Yeah, you've got to be careful with some of the things that you're doing there, the off-gassing from mushrooms. But generally, if you've got reasonable levels of ventilation and that ventilation is being filtered, you're okay.
Okay. So overall, the idea is to grow more with less space and also cut down transport time by putting those locations in the centre of cities right near all the restaurants.
Yep.
So people are saving money on transport and they're getting more delicious vegetables pretty much straight to their door.
Yep. And a greater variety. Yep. So as I said, those varieties that normally have been knocked out of the grocery store because it's either perishes too quickly.
Oh, true.
We want to put that product into our space.
So can you grow out of season?
Yeah. So we call ourselves non-seasonal. So we can grow anything, anytime.
Wow.
So that means, yeah.
Is there any like negative side effects to doing that? Or like, do vegetables want to be seasonal, or do they just really care for the light and nutrients?
Yeah, they do. Plants have triggers. Some plants have triggers to get them started. So you got to know what those triggers are. And generally that's based on the seasons. Yeah. So some plants react to colder climates. So that's what happens when you get cold climate seasonal varieties, is that they really like the cold. So we can do that. And you just got to know what those recipes are. We call them what's the grow recipe for that plant.
Oh,
and some plants are different. Some seeds take a different way of getting them to germinate. So you got to know what that grow recipe is. Otherwise, you could be there for months trying to go, how come that seed's not, how come that's not germinating? Or the germination success rate is, we're trying to get to 90+% success rate. Plant 100 seeds, and hopefully you'll get 90+ seeds that are germinated.
Wow, that can come down to seed quality though, right?
It does, but also the environment that they sit in. So you can have the best quality seed, but if you don't, again, the traditional farmers, they would just run the furrows of seeds down there and hope, wow, I'm hoping that the moisture is going to be right. I hope the soil is going to be right. I hope the nutrients going to be there. I hope the temperature is going to be right. I hope it doesn't frost. I hope it doesn't snow.
Yeah.
All of these different conditions that they're hoping for. Whereas we're saying, we think we know the perfect recipe for those particular seeds. This is what we've got to do to germinate them, and this is what we've got to do to grow them.
So I guess does that mean you can always have just as nutritious, just as plentiful, probably more controlled and reliable, less pests getting onto you? your vegetables as
we
well?
don't use pesticides. We don't use herbicides because we don't get pests. We do get some pests. Like if a vertical farmer says they don't get any pests, no, we still get some. But our infestation is a lot less and we can control it really quickly.
Yeah.
We were able to get onto it and we don't use any chemicals to get rid of them. So the beauty from a vertical farming perspective is you're not on a massive broadacre farm that you don't have eyes over, whereas in our farm we've got eyes over everything. So we don't get possums, so that's good.
Yeah,
we don't get birds, we don't get all those other pests, but we still get some small amount of pests, and we're able to control that much quicker without the use of chemicals.
Okay. Is it organic food?
We can't call it organic. We have all of our nutrients that go into it are organically certified, and they're locally organically certified nutrients. So I've been lucky enough to know one of the guys that provides us with that nutrient mix. It's a company called Convert. I've worked with John, who owns the company. He's set up in Griffith down southern part of New South Wales. And he creates this organically certified nutrient. He does it for both broadacre farms, and we were the first hydroponic farm that he trialled with. And so we use he's got about 4 or 5 different ranges now, and we're actually creating our own hydroponic organically certified mix right now. Right now it's still in trial, but we've been using his organically certified product. But because we don't grow in soil, and we can still use an organically certified nutrient, have organically certified seeds, organically certified medium, we still can't call it organically certified.
Because it's not grown in soil.
It's not grown in soil, but we're looking to try and change that.
Yeah, right. What's hydroponics?
So hydroponics is
Thank you for listening to part 1 of our interview with Wayne. If you enjoyed what you heard, then please jump over to Vertical Patch and give them a follow. Secondly, if you listen regularly and want to hear more, then please help us out by leaving a star rating and comment, and we can continue to bring more and more episodes. Remember to like or share it with a friend if it reminds you of them, and leave a view in the section below. Or if you really found the information valuable, you're welcome to purchase me a scrumptious cup of Make More Podcast juice at buymeacoffee.com/betweenviews. In other news, Between Views is looking for collaborators in Instagram, social media, product development, and marketing. If you want to join the team, then please reach out on Instagram. Thanks so much. Finally, if you know someone who deserves to be interviewed or just has some feedback, then send us an email at betweenviewsbb@gmail.com or message us on Instagram. Thanks again and see you soon. Between Views.